Do you remember the first time you unlocked a really cool spell in FF14? It may have went something like this.
Throwing flashbang.
And sure enough, jobs in FF14 are very flashy, but is it all style with no substance? Let's have a look at the job design today to find out. Hello, Baker here with another FF14 analysis. Let's talk about what makes jobs in 14 so awesome. Now, I gotta be real with you, the reason I wanted to do this so soon was because I freaking love the job system, man. It's honestly my favorite class/customization system in a video game. So much so that it is my belief that if a game features the job system, then that game pretty much immediately becomes good in my books. In this video then, I'll be discussing the origins of the job system, what I enjoy about it, how it relates to 14, and of course, what I like about 14's implementation of the job system specifically, and also a bit of comparison between 14 and other MMO class systems. Do note that this video will feature next to no discussion surrounding gameplay. If you want my thoughts on gameplay of the jobs, I have a video on that you can go check out titled Shadowbringers, Is Gameplay Lacking? As with the previous video, this video is fully spoiler free as well. Anyway, let's get to it. Since a lot of people that play FF14 have 14 as their only played title from the series, and the job system is featured in basically the two least popular mainline titles in the West, I think it's a good idea to walk you guys through what the job system actually is. We'll have to go all the way back to 1987 for this one. Most people probably know the story behind the origins of Final Fantasy. The man himself, Hironobu Sakaguchi, was down bad and created one last game which turned out to be a success, thus birthing more oxymoronical Final Fantasy sequels. Something one can observe about Final Fantasy I is that it was basically Mr. Sakaguchi's own little D&D adventure on the Famicom/NES. The game was heavily inspired by D&D from its story structure to the adventuring theme all the way to the fact that almost every single enemy in the game was blatantly copy-pasted from the monster manual. This imitation of course included classes: Monk, Thief, Fighter. Even the iconic spellcaster jobs Black Mage, White Mage and Red Mage came from a widely popular D&D novel called Dragonlance. In it, there were 3 distinct schools of magic, and each school wore robes in accordance to each school. These were white, black and red. White robes representing magic being used for good ends, black for more nefarious personal gain, and the red ones were neutral, which came to translate over as White Mage who had restorative spells, Black Mage who had destructive spells, and Red Mage who had a mix of both. So if you ever felt like the job system or classes in Final Fantasy reminded you of D&D, that's because some of them pretty much came from D&D. FF3 and FF5 were then logical progressions from this system. Now, it could be said that 3 was where the job system really began, since not only did it add a bunch of new ones with a better identity to the series, but it also lets you swap jobs instead of being locked with the ones you started on. However, the true grandfather of the job systems used in more or less all the FF titles is Final Fantasy V. I admit I am very biased, but the job system in 5 is something I would simply describe as immaculate. First of all, FF5 introduced many of the iconic jobs to the series: Blue Mage, Beastmaster, Samurai, Dancer, Chemist, Time Mage and Mystic Knight. It was also the first time the jobs were actually a part of the story and the game world instead of some mega abstract thing. But most importantly, FF5 introduced the idea of cross-classing. You level up a job, you can then pass on commands and traits to other jobs. This was awesome as it gave the game an insane level of customization, and keep in mind, this game was made in the early 90s, so it's honestly a little mind-blowing how much customization there is in such an old game. So what exactly makes me think of this system so fondly, even calling it my favorite class system? In essence, FF5 successfully created a nice gameplay loop that encouraged discovering new moves and synergizing between jobs. Cross-class abilities were actually strong, there were some fantastic synergies, Every class brought something awesome to the table, and whenever you switched to a new job, you had access to that job's full potential right away, so it didn't feel ass to swap since you wouldn't be gimped by doing so, further encouraging the player to keep trying different combinations and learning more skills to cross-class. In other words, the system perfectly fits into itself and makes for very fun gameplay. So it's not that the job system is all that unique in itself necessarily, its greatness comes from how well it was executed. This game was beloved in Japan and still is to this date, but sadly the original never released overseas because the job system would have been too much for an A-brain, and yes, that sentiment is the official reasoning given by Square at the time. But hey, we got this piece of shit instead. Despite this, the job system was so good that it was used in a ton of titles moving forward, Tactics as well as all its spin-offs. Then 2 had it, 12 had a scuffed one in its re-releases, FF11 had it, and it even spawned an entire game series, the Bravely Default games, literally just to cater to fans who enjoy the system. Even FF5 itself gets played to this date, for instance through the 4-Job Fiesta, a charity event ran every summer, something I have participated in since 2013 myself, which further goes to show how beloved this system is, since thousands of people are running it annually despite the game being 3 decades old. In a nutshell, people absolutely love this system, so it's no surprise that FF11, their first MMO, used it as well. FF14 1.0 was a game heavily influenced by 11. Sadly, the game flopped since 11 was a pre-WoW MMO, which didn't mix well with today's MMO market. And so, A Realm Reborn was made to be in line with the post-World of Warcraft market. Many of you probably know this, how Mr. Yoshida took elements from other successful Western MMOs and incorporated them into FF14. However, they still kept the job system. This meant that this old system, the job system, was mixed with some of these newer Western MMO influences, namely the Holy Trinity, which essentially refers to a system using the standard tank/healer/DPS setup. Jobs weren't defined by such associations before. Sure, some were more supportive oriented, more healing oriented or whatever, but there was no such distinction as, oh, ninja is a DPS while white mage is a healer. These classic jobs being assigned into these 3 groups is therefore an interesting and unique aspect only present in FF14 through its special circumstances. In its original implementation, the job system in 14 did feature quite a few qualities from the FF5 inspired job systems. They wanted it where leveling jobs would be encouraged, and they aimed to achieve this in 2 different ways. First was that you needed certain classes at 15 to unlock your jobs. This was something taken directly out of Tactics, where you needed multiple jobs at certain levels to unlock new ones. For example, to unlock Bard, you not only needed level 30 Archer, but also a level 15 Pugilist. Additionally, the cross-classing element from 5 was kept. A skill like Swiftcast was not innate to healers, rather you had to level Thaumaturge to level 26 first to be able to use it. You could cast Ruin on White Mage to spend less MP on your offensive spells, or use Blizzard 2 on certain classes outside of Black Mage, which was nice for lower levels. Both of these systems were scrapped simultaneously with the release of Stormblood, because the execution of these systems received some critique. There were plenty of memes with players not unlocking their skills. You could literally play Dark Knight without having Provoke unlocked, because you didn't touch Gladiator, so now you can't do a tank swap, making certain harder fights literally unclearable with such a person in the party. A healer might not have Swiftcast for a quick res, not because it's on cooldown, but because they literally don't have it. And having to level an unrelated class to 15 just to unlock your job annoyed some players. So yeah, at some point the developers agreed that it was a bit silly you had to play a class you didn't want to play to enhance your current job. Figuring that reworking this whole system was too much of a hassle, they opted to simply remove it entirely. 4.0 still tried to keep the choice aspect by limiting you to 5 cross-class skill slots, but this was scrapped later on too. It was just really annoying how you had some real no-brainer skills in there, like Provoke or Rampart on a tank, or Lucid Dreaming on healer. It's like, why wouldn't you take that, right? Skills like Protect were also annoying cause you either had to cast it at the start and swap it out, or just live with only having 4 slots essentially. So players gave their feedback and the choice part of the job system was heated as well. So nowadays really the only thing retained on jobs is the ability to easily swap, it being tied to the story, as well as the aesthetics/strong identity aspect. So we've compared the job system to the series, but what about other MMOs? So compared to other MMOs, FF14's class system doesn't have much in the way of customization. The game doesn't have any specs, so you cannot, for example, be a gunbreaker melee DPS or a healing dancer, although I did hear warriors are pretty much healers by default. There are no talents, aka skills/passives, that have choices. This is otherwise known as a skill tree. The most you can do is through melding materia, but that has minimal impact on gameplay besides skill/spell speed, and even then, it has very little consequence and only on a handful of jobs. Additionally, classes are restricted to specific weapon types. There are of course certain levels of variety of weapons on each job, but you can't go crazy with dual-wielding a warrior like you can in World of Warcraft, nor do jobs gain additional weapon types, such as in games like Guild Wars 2. All of this sounds quite limiting, so that begs the question, why do people love the jobs in FF14 so much? I believe there are 3 main reasons. The first reason is the one most readily apparent, the fact that in FF14 you can play every class on the same character. This is such a huge W, and every single time a new player joins the game, they love this feature to death. Remember when I talked about the job system in 5, about how it encourages to try out different things? This is exactly that in spirit. In 14, there is no downside to unlocking a new job and trying it out. In other games, the downside is that you either have to invest time or money to level up a new character with that class, and there might be other things such as limited character slots that plays into your decision to try out another class. In 14, this hurdle is completely removed, and that means you are much more likely to actually try out other jobs. The second reason is balance/viability. Okay, I said I wouldn't talk about gameplay, but I just felt like mentioning that this is a big reason why FF14 is so simplistic with its jobs, instead of going for these crazy skill trees or whatever. The thing with customization is that the more there is, the harder it becomes to balance. Think about designing a fight in an MMO, right? You have individual classes that interact with the boss, and in addition, you have classes that interact with each other and the boss. This is already a ton of interactions. Now, if you further add in skill trees and other ways of spicing up your class, the amount of interactions becomes so asinine that you essentially cannot feasibly even attempt to balance it. At that point, your sole option is to kinda just accept that some classes will be really bad for this encounter, but because FF14 doesn't have those skill trees or other things, they can somewhat feasibly keep all jobs viable, even in the highest end of content. The benefits of this are obvious. You can pick a job, main it, and play it for multiple expansions without having to worry that one day your job will become ineffective due to a patch or an expansion, and you will be peer pressured to play something you do not enjoy. The final reason that people love jobs in 14 despite the lack of customization, I believe comes down to the exact same reason I gave why summons are so awesome. They have lots and lots of personality. First and foremost, we have the stellar work done by the team behind those animations. The visuals and sound effects for FF14 jobs are god tier, which is of course tradition in the series, as the FF games are known for having these incredible and flashy spell effects. They also perfectly fit the class fantasy they were going for with each job. Often even basic attacks part of your rotations have a lot of work put into them, and I do think that over time some people have grown so used to this standard that they kind of forget how important this is. You could design a class with the most intricate mechanics and a fantastic gameplay loop, but if the animations for it look like shit, most people will not bother. Functionality is important, there's no doubting that, but we humans love eye candy. When something looks cool, it has more weight to it. If this supposedly powerful attack looks like a wet fart, it won't matter how hard it hits for, subconsciously we will immediately think it's rubbish because it looks rubbish. the flashiness of the animations also increase longevity. There's a reason people don't get tired of a job like Black Mage despite it mostly spamming Fire 4. It's because Fire 4 looks freaking amazing. Also, let's not forget how many of us are always looking forward to the job action trailers leading up to every expansion. Sure, we also get glimpses of the gameplay, but let's be honest, we all come to watch the shiny new attacks. And to complement these awesome animations, we have the AF gear that releases with new jobs, giving them even more charm. Seriously, I want to give a shout out to the people designing these outfits. I adore those designs. I always love getting a job to max level and seeing what cool new AF gear they made for them, which are of course callbacks to how changing jobs in old titles would change your appearance. Also, whenever a character in the story swaps jobs, it's always made out to be a big deal. It's often tied to the character's growth, which is awesome. Besides the stunning visuals and the fashionable outfits, something that gives the jobs a lot of personality is the amount of story tied to them, and not just the amount, the quality too, unless you're playing Paladin of course. There is just a ridiculous amount of story surrounding the jobs in this game. These quests tell you about the job's relevance to the setting, and they often have a lot of flavor in regards to how you are mastering these arts, in what way you are getting empowered, that sort of stuff. But they also have their own themes and cool characters going on, and one would think that because they are just job quests, that they would be low effort. But most of them are actually quite brilliant. I mean, the fact that the Dark Knight quests are some of the most beloved storylines from the whole game attests to that. Significant things also happen in them. You might help fix entire societies, single-handedly revive or give birth to long-lost arts, cure something that was thought incurable, or even prevent the entire planet from being blown up by a meteor. And Endwalker was awesome because it had these job quest characters involved in the MSQ, making it all essentially super worth it. Oh, I also want to add a note about the battle theme that plays whenever you do the final fight. It really gives some weight to that epic finale, whether that be something personal such as saving a dear friend from being consumed by madness, fighting your own darkness, having to confront the master that taught you, or something on a bigger scale such as preventing an entire civilization's extinction, stopping an ancient evil, or preventing an apocalypse. The song has both these epic and tragic undertones in it to make it a perfect fit for your final encounter in these job quests. This doesn't apply to every job, but I also love the little things like each tank and conjurer getting a mount themed after them, Bard getting the perform feature, and Ninja having reduced fall damage, innately faster movement speed, and a different jump animation from other jobs. Some jobs also have their unique theme tied to them, such as Dancer or Ninja. I also love the flavor on certain abilities and the LB3s, where we get little lore snippets about these skills. Sadly, they stopped doing this after Heavensward, which is something I do miss, but I understand it's taxing for the lore team to keep creating flavor for all these abilities. Likewise, existing jobs only got a single quest in Shadowbringers at max level and none in Endwalker. The job quests were scrapped in favor of the new role quests, which are awesome in their own right, and again, I do understand why they stopped making entire quest lines every expansion. There's just way too many jobs to keep that up, or they'd have to start sacrificing quality. But yeah, between the awesome visuals and great storylines, jobs in 14 have a ton of personality. Moreover, they didn't completely abandon the idea of class customization. Rather, they simply moved it to other content. In Eureka and Bozia, as well as presumably something to come in Endwalker, you can have a surprising amount of fun with different setups because these places allow for some wacky customization. You can fully eliminate cast times from any job. You can make any job have a 1.5 second GCD. You can become a white mage that outdamages most DPS, but your heals don't basically do anything. You can become a samurai tank. You can res people as any job. You can reset all your cooldowns on a whim, or reduce your recast times by 75% on a tank. Use literal hallowed ground on any DPS job. Combine everything to create your own little LB3 as a caster, and so on. You even have actions from other jobs that you can then utilize on any job of your choosing. Ethereal manipulation, elusive jump, bloodbath, even self-destruct if you so wish. How about charging up for an entire minute to deliver an insanely powerful attack on the enemy, or turning your entire party into Sonic the Hedgehogs, or straight up just heal a Ep.3 without needing any LB or even being a healer. I could keep going, but there's lots and lots of neat little things you can do in those places. The synergies between both those actions themselves, as well as your own job's actions, are endless, and to me it was quite reminiscent of that thing I mentioned when I was describing FF5's job system, customizing and trying out different things and having fun, since you could be really powerful with certain combos. The reason they push this in the Relic content is because it's separated from everything else. This allows them to freely experiment and do crazy things without having to worry about the game balance. I'm personally in favor of doing it this way because, let's be honest, it's either that or not having these things at all. It's the same thing with limited jobs. I like Blue Mage a lot. It's really appealing as a fun side activity because they manage to retain its original feel, and there's lots of interesting and broken things you can do on said job. I definitely think it was the right move to make that job limited so we could see its full potential. I hope we get other limited jobs at some point later down the line, cause I rather enjoy them. Okay, so I just wanted to slide this extra bit here because I never mentioned PvP in this video. They reworked PvP in 6.1, which made the jobs have way more flavor within that mode, meaning in PvP you have more job expression than in the game proper. But at the end of the day, PvP is completely separated, so I didn't bother making this into an actual talking point. Plus, it could be a video on its own. But yes, I didn't forget about PvP for all of you crystalline conflict enjoyers. To sum it all up here at the end, I would say the job system in 14 played a decent role in the success of the game. The jobs in 14 add a lot of charm to the game, charm without which the world would feel shallow. That was my aim with this video, to emphasize its importance. I also wanted to mix in some history of the series, so I hope you found some of that stuff interesting at least. I honestly couldn't help not gushing about the job system. Every time one of my friends play a game with the job system, they too fall in love with it. If you only played FF14 and want to see how the job system is like in some of those old games, I can highly recommend a game like Bravely Default, or even just straight up Final Fantasy V, and see for yourself. It's legitimately one of the most fun class-slash customization systems out there. In any case, I plan on having these broad FF14 analysis topics to be a common occurrence on this channel, so feel free to drop a sub if you want to stick around and see more of these. Have a nice day!